All right, welcome to the El Cajon City Council meeting. We continue holding meetings remotely while the governor's executive order continues to be in effect due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to remind our citizens they can submit questions for items on today's agenda as we have done in previous meetings. I encourage that public comments be submitted at this time. They will be read at the appropriate time during this meeting. Comments will be accepted up to the conclusion of the vote of the item. Comments may be submitted through the City of El Cajon's website, and that's cityofelcajon.us. Under Agendas and Minutes, go to Video Streaming, and you will see a button to submit your comments. This meeting is now called to order, and I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, can you please confirm that you are present when I call on your name? Mayor Wells?
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
Yes, I'm here.
Council Member Goebel?
I'm here.
Council Member Kendrick?
Here.
And Council Member McClellan?
Present.
Thank you.
All right, would you all join me with saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and then after the Pledge of Allegiance, remain silent for a brief moment. And I'd also like to acknowledge those who have served our nation as we celebrate Veterans Day tomorrow. And let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Before we get started, I wanted to say something about my friend Bob McClellan, who's having his last meeting, his last official meeting, after 28 years of service to the city of El Cajon. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Well done. You want to make a little speech?
Just that it's been a joy to be able to do some of the things we've done for the city and in the city and for the moral community. That was one of my main functions or reasons for getting involved with the city council. Had some great wins. Remember doing away with the cigarette machines and no smoking in restaurants after I got elected, and then kind of Gary came along and he picked up that banner and has been doing most of that with my assistant, because we really would discuss it first generally, and then the El Cajon Transitional Living Center, a couple of hotels. It's been a lot of good things have happened in the city council, and the Magnolia Theater getting opened and then having to close it right away again, but there's been a lot of wonderful things that have happened. Our Christian community has grown and flourished and made a good moral fiber in things, some of the things that they've done in the city, which is really positive. The 40 days of prayer and all that. It's just a remarkable thing. Been a lot of things that weren't too interesting, but some of the things you could do and help make happen have really been a blessing to me. So I'm ready to retire, and after 28 and a half years, that's enough.
This is not your official retirement date.
No.
I believe we're having an official program at the next meeting, right?
Yeah.
So
probably a goodbye then and swearing in of the new councilman.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to that, but this is still a big day with your last official meeting.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. We're going to move on. The city clerk posted orders of adjournment of the October 27th, 2020 meeting and the agenda of the November 10th, 2020 meeting in accordance with state law Counseling and Housing Authority policy. We're at agenda changes. Staff, do you have any agenda changes?
Mr. Mayor, we have no recommended changes to the agenda.
Okay. Council, any agenda changes? Okay, then. That brings us then to consent items. Consent items are routine matters enacted by one motion according to the recommendation listed below. With the concurrence of the City Council, a council member or person in attendance may request discussion of a consent item at this time. Council members, does anybody want to pull a consent item?
No.
Staff?
No, sir.
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent items.
Second.
Thank you, sir. And for the record, we received no comments for consent items. Mayor Wells, may I have your vote?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel?
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
That brings us to public comment. At this time, any person may address a matter within the jurisdiction of the City Council, Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency that is not on the agenda. Comments related to items on today's agenda are to be taken at the time the item is heard. State law prohibits discussion or action on items not on the agenda. However, City Council and Housing Authority members may briefly respond to statements or questions, and an item may be placed on a future agenda. Angela, did we see any comments for public comment?
We did, sir. We received two comments from the same person, so I will read them together. And it's from Fadia Gorges. And the first comment is, because of the rising number of COVID-19 cases has pushed the county into the most restrictive level, how will this affect our children? As you know, the school is still open in the city of El Cajon. The second comment, what is the meaning of America Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare? Question mark. And no more comments were received.
I don't know about the American Academy of Social Work, Social Welfare. Does anybody? I'm sorry, that's a foreign thing to me, but I assume that it has to do with social workers. Thank you for your comment. All right. There are no written communications on today's agenda, and that brings us to public hearings. We have one item to consider. Item 10 is regarding a First Amendment to the 2021 one-year action plan. And staff, will you please tell us about this? Brad?
Jamie Van Ralphison is going to be giving the presentation, and
Okay.
she just got on, so here she
There
is.
she is. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this is a public hearing to amend the one-year action plan for reallocating $700,000 in CDBG funds for the acquisition of property for Crisis House, Inc. This action reflects the City Council's intentions and commitment outlined in the amended lease termination agreement that the City Council approved on July 28th of 2020. So Crisis House has now entered into escrow for a property at 9550 North Cleomaca Street in Santee and is seeking this grant funding in order to close escrow on or about November 30th of 2020, and they have indicated they'll be vacating the property at 1034 North Magnolia Avenue by December 31st of 2020. Crisis House has also committed to continuing to provide essential services for the homeless and for victims of domestic violence throughout the East County region, including El Cajon. So funds will be temporarily reallocated from the Wells Park project currently underway, and also from the CDBG unallocated fund balance as described in the agenda report for this item. As the final step in this process, Crisis House will enter an agreement with the city for continuation of those essential services in the new location. The agreement will require them to report on the number of individuals and households served, including El Cajon residents, and the types of services provided for a 10-year period. Staff recommends that the City Council amend the one-year action plan and reallocate the funds to Crisis House with the acquisition of property for the provision of the CDBG eligible services. And we are prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Council, any questions? I think you answered this question already, but I just want to make sure. We had a set a deadline to get everybody moved out, and so that they could get the funding. There's no problem with that. Escrow's not going to carry past the deadline, or are they all going to be in their new place by the time the deadline is up? That's my question.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. Based on, and they're already moving things out. Their intention is to be out actually a few weeks before the end of the year. So I think they will make that deadline.
Sounds great. Any other questions with council members? If not, we'll go on to open the public hearing. Angela, did you receive any comments for this item?
We received no comments, sir.
I can make a motion then to close public hearing.
Second.
Thank you.
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick. Councilmember Kendrick, your vote, please.
You're muted, Gary.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Well, everybody, this seems like a housekeeping item. It sounds like everything worked out exactly the way we had intended it to, so we should be happy about this. I'm happy to take a motion at this point.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mayor, thank you, Mayor. Sorry, go ahead.
Angela, do you need more detail than that, Morgan?
No,
You're
the
muted.
vote is to approve the resolution, so that's exactly what the agenda report recommends.
Super. Okay, Angela, you're up.
Thank you. Mayor Wells, your vote.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, staff, for all the hard work you put in this. All right, we have 6 administrative reports on today's agenda. Item 11 is the approval of the pension obligation bonds. And staff, will you please tell us about this?
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and distinguished members of the City Council. My name is Cajon. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of El Cajon. Who should be joining us here today will be Julio Morales, our Municipal Advisor from Urban Futures, and Reed Glyer, part of our Bond Council from Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Routh, should we have questions for either of them. So for today's presentation, the first question we want to ask is why POBs? We want to spend some time discussing the fundamental reason why we're pursuing this strategy, as well as discussing some of the risks associated with them. We'll move on to discuss, and this will be throughout the discussion, our outlook, strategy, as well as the process. At which point we'll also run you through the recommended actions, and then open the floor to discussions on the matter. To get us up to speed, I thought this would be a good place to start. This chart should look familiar. We presented it to the City Council 2 weeks ago as part of the presentation of the pension funding policy. And I thought this was a good way to start with the why POBs are being pursued. Simply put, that top line represents the status of our pension funds, our 2 funds, our safety fund and our miscellaneous, or safety plan and our miscellaneous plan. The plans collectively have a total liability of approximately $579 million, for which we've set aside approximately $372 million. This shortfall leads to an unfunded liability of approximately $207 million. One thing I want to point out on this slide, which we'll come back to later in the discussion, is we have 9 years of valuations represented here, going from the most recent at the top, getting older as you work down the page. And as you can see, over the 9 years presented here, we've watched this unfunded liability, the gap between the assets we have set aside and the liability, grow from approximately $126 million to the $207 million where we are today. The main point of the pension obligation bond is we are effectively borrowing money at a low interest rate through the issuance of bonds to give to CalPERS to bring the assets set aside for these plans to be on par with the liability and improve our funding status from approximately 64% closer to being fully funded. To help underline the why this is an attractive strategy, I'd like to present the cash flow analysis that's also contained as part of the agenda report. I won't run you through all the numbers here, but I do want to draw your attention to a couple of three columns and what they mean in terms of an analogy we have used throughout these discussions. One of the analogies we've used pretty regularly is the concept of refinancing your mortgage. And this can kind of tie back to this presentation in this way. I think we can think of the column labeled UAL payments, or unfunded accrued liability payments, as our existing mortgage. This is what we owe to CalPERS. Each year CalPERS adds a new layer to this debt and then amortize each of those layers out through a considerable amount of time. Collectively, our scheduled payments run out for the next 24 years and total approximately $365.1 million over that time. What we're proposing with the issuance of POBs and is basically refinancing that mortgage. That debt service column, the one right to the left, represents our new mortgage, the proposed mortgage. Has a amortization period of 20 years, so it's actually less than our current length of payments. And most importantly, the total of these debt service payments totals approximately $275 million over 20 years. Collectively, over that whole 24-year span, we're projecting, based on the estimates and assumptions tied into this analysis, savings of approximately $90.2 million. Now, it should be said that these projected savings go out for a considerable length of time into the future. And also included for this analysis is a net present value of the savings, which basically expresses the sum of those savings in today's dollars. Understanding the time value of money, $1 in the future is worth less than $1 today. But even with that calculation, we're still looking at a net present value of this proposed transaction of approximately $64 million. A couple of the assumptions that we want to make sure we're clear about in this work is that this assumes a full issuance of $200 million. When we get a little bit later in the presentation, we may talk about different strategies and opinions. I just want to make it clear, if we decide to issue a lower amount, that will also reduce the savings we're likely to experience. Also, savings are not necessarily linear in that if you reduce that amount by 10%, does not necessarily mean the savings will reduce 10% as well. Our assumed structure is a 20-year term. This is going to be important in a few minutes as well. And we also are anticipating, and this is a reasonable estimate of what we're expecting, of an issuance cost, a true interest cost of approximately 3.19% overall. One thing that's very important to understand with this work, though, is that it does not assume any new CalPERS layers, any new CalPERS debt, which we'll experience year after year as through the normal course of business. the reason I bring this up and stress that point so strongly is I don't want to give the false impression that this is a one and done kind of solution. We will not refinance our mortgage and then be done with this issue. CalPERS will add a new layer, a new amortization layer every year. And this is where that pension funding policy becomes important. In that policy, you've approved a policy that gives us the ability to address these issues and talk about them on a regular basis to keep us from sliding backwards and rebuilding this debt once we've taken this action to address it. Some of these other actions which help some of the issues related to POBs include the establishment of the PARS 115 trust and reserves to help accomplish those goals. This transaction is not without risk, though, and I do not want to be bashful about that. The leading professional body in government finance is the Government Finance Officers Association, and they have issued an advisory, a very strongly worded advisory against the issuance of POBs. This position is worded so strongly that I have created the PowerPoint sin of putting an awful lot of words on a slide and then read them to you. But I think it's important we listen to what the GFOA advises on the subject. Pension obligation bonds are taxable bonds that some state and local governments have issued as part of an overall strategy to fund the unfunded portion of their pension liabilities by creating debt. The use of POBs rests on the assumption that the bond proceeds, when invested with pension assets in higher yielding asset classes, will be able to achieve a rate of return that is greater than the interest rate owed over the term of the bonds. However, POBs involve considerable investment risk, making this goal very speculative. Failing to achieve the targeted rate of return burdens the issuer with both the debt service requirements of the taxable bonds and the unfunded pension liabilities that remain unmet because the investment portfolio did not perform as anticipated. In recent years, local jurisdictions across the country have faced increased financial stress as a result of their reliance on POBs, demonstrating the significant risks associated with these instruments for both small and large governments. In addition to this quote, there are a number of points that they continue to address, and I'd like to discuss each of them because I think it's important to be aware of our decision-making process and why we continue to support this strategy. The first of which they comment that the invested POB proceeds might fail to earn more than the interest rate owed. And I will not shy away from that criticism. That is the biggest risk that concerns me as well. We'll spend a considerable amount of time discussing that in just a moment. They also suggest that POBs are complex instruments that carry considerable risk. It goes on and lists a number of ways that sometimes these arrangements add complexity, and this was an important component from the very get-go of this discussion, was we pursued a very vanilla offering, a very basic bond issuance structure, and deliberately avoid some of the complications and risk associated with these additional components. They also cite that POBs can increase the jurisdiction's bonded debt burden and potentially use up debt capacity that could be used for other purposes. This one causes me a little bit of pause. The city of El Cajon has been very, very conservative for decades and has relied on debt very, very minimally in its past. We currently have no general obligation debt in the slightest. It's kind of, I don't want to use the word amusing, but I find it interesting that if we were pursuing a $200 million bond, let's say to build a new city hall, the GFOA doesn't have an advisory against that. However, to issue debt, take on debt where we don't otherwise have it to address our biggest financial threat, it seems a little inconsistent. And I think part of that stems from a lot of the cities that have gotten in trouble with POBs were already highly leveraged and were circling the drain, if you will, and really getting desperate with ways to pull it together and issue POBs when they were already in trouble, honestly. They also cite that POBs frequently extend the repayment period longer than the actual amortization period. That was what I wanted to draw attention to when we were discussing the cash flow analysis. We are looking to spread the 25 or 24 remaining years of our first mortgage over 20 years in our proposed refinancing to 20. So we are deliberately looking to do the opposite and shorten that period. Lastly, rating agencies may not view the proposed issuance of POBs as credit positive, particularly if the issuance is not part of a more comprehensive plan to address pension funding shortfalls. And this is an area that I think is important, and I completely agree with the GFOA. However, we have been very diligent about putting together a comprehensive plan to address this issue. We have a number of tools in the toolbox to address it, albeit this is one of the larger ones. To be honest, I don't want to criticize the GFOA. I think if I was in their position and had to issue a comment or some sort of opinion that's going to suit every organization nationwide, I'd probably take the same position. But I would argue that El Cajon's a little unique in that we are not starting this discussion from a point of weakness, but rather from considerable strength in terms of our reserves and prior debt commitment. One of the other things that the GFOA's advisory does not take into account is almost looks at POBs in isolation without considering the overall environment. And that's a difficult thing to do because realistically, if we do not take action, there's considerable risk of not doing anything. As you saw in that very first slide, over that 9-year period, we watched that UAL grow significantly. Along with that, our annual payments to CalPERS have grown significantly. And there's nothing suggesting that that trend will not continue. So simply, we have to take some sort of action. That leads us to what are the alternatives? We have taken a number of smaller actions that will have an impact and is a move in the right direction. However, they alone will not make a significant impact on this problem. Realistically, the only alternative that I see that could make the same kind of headway is if rather than issuing debt to create the influx of funding into the pension plans, would be to make significant cuts to the city's operating budget to make additional contributions in that way. And frankly, I don't know if that would be our plan A. I mean, it's a serious issue, sure, but the kind of contributions we'd be talking about would create considerable hardship to the citizens of El Cajon. And lastly, when we're discussing risk, a lot of the criticisms, that very first point and much of the discussion about investment loss, frankly, is inherent to having our plans on deposit with CalPERS in the first place. Realistically, regardless of where the funding comes from, the risk of CalPERS losing our money exists. And to that point, I'll move into, well, a slide that you've seen before as well also. This is a graph representing CalPERS historical investment returns over a 20-year period. And I had mentioned last time I presented this that I thought this was a little bit misleading because it shows investment returns over or below zero. That is to imply that if it's a positive return, it's a good thing, and a negative return is bad, and surely a negative return is bad. But realistically, for these plans to operate, they have to hit a targeted rate of return of 7%. So realistically, anything below 7% is a problem for us and needs to be made up through additional contributions. So what I've done is taken that slide and I've adjusted it by that 7%. While the original slide was a kind of a rosy picture suggesting that 14 of 20 years were positive or above the line, this tells quite a different story. One thing this is kind of a non-scientific anecdotal analysis, but just the sense of how much blue you're seeing above that line, above that threshold versus below, kind of tells a story here. Adjusting that axis to 7%, now we only have 11 of 20 years where CalPERS have performed better than the target amount. One of the points the FOA makes is that you fail to earn returns above what your rate of your borrowing is, and I have adjusted that slide again, this time adjusting that line to a hypothetical rate of the bond issuance rate. In this case, I used 3.5%. We're currently working with an estimate of 3.19, so this is actually even a little better than this. But this paints a little bit better story. In order for us to be in the good, if you will, and earning above that 3.5%, we can see that CalPERS over the last 20 years has done that in 13 of 20 years. Still not staggering, but the sense of how much time they spend in the blue above the line versus below is a little bit more reassuring. Additionally, when you look at the compound rate of return that they present for each of the plans in the actuarial valuations, they have surpassed this threshold for both the 1, 5, 10, and 20-year periods. But we're not the only one considering risk and the possible performance of this strategy. This slide shows what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. I won't go through each and every line represented on the graph. The only takeaway on this graph is there's a lot of lines. And what this shows is that this analysis is based on 10,000 separate scenarios of possible outcomes of this strategy. In doing so, it kind of gives you a sense of odds and what are the odds, the probability of success. And in running this analysis, I'm not sure I properly credited, this was run by Urban Futures. Julio Morales provided this for us. We had a probability of success of approximately 70% and also projected us to the good by somewhere between $55 and $60 million. But in addition to that, our bond underwriters have also performed significant analysis about this strategy. In this case, presented is some of their stress testing of what would happen if. In the first line, their base case scenario is a full issuance of the bond proceeds, a $200 million issuance to refund the UAL, and the plan, the CalPERS plans perform as targeted at 7% return. And they're listing net present value savings of $55.3 million. The next line down is probably the one single scenario that scares people involved in these decisions more than anything else, and it's significant losses in the first year. And this is that scenario where we issue bonds, we give it over to CalPERS, and then they immediately lose, in this case, a 20% loss in the first year. And then the scenario would be, normal returns after that. In this scenario, we still managed to be to the good by $8 million net present value. So it certainly isn't anything to daydream about, but it did stand up to that test. Now, I can't say that a 20% loss has never happened. We clearly see in the graphs I just presented that it has happened. But I hope also most people recognize that as a fairly infrequent event. Additionally, we stress tested at a 6% annual return level, which is 1% below targeted rate, just to see the impact on that. And it did reduce our savings, as you would expect, to approximately $35.5 million net present value. And then again, we ramped that down by another percentage to a 5% annual return, which still yielded savings of approximately $20 million over the term of the bonds. So I share all this with you to kind of give you an idea of what some of the potential downside is with this decision to go along with the upside. And also to reassure you that this isn't a shooting from the hip scenario. We have a number of people who specialize in this work, analyzing these decisions and helping us make a good decision. So from here, with the remaining to-do list, if you will, process and strategy, we do have a judgment filed for the validation process. The appeal period should expire this week. Today, we are before you for discussion on the matter, and we're seeking the approval of issuing pension obligation bonds. We have a rating agency presentation scheduled for this Thursday with S&P. We expect them to take a couple of weeks to turn around their rating. We hope to have that before the end of the month. Pretty much picking up as quickly as next week, assuming everything goes well. We're going to start digging into the market information and try to make a decision on the best time to issue. And then following all these items will be the eventual pricing and closing of the bonds. Before you today are a number of documents in addition to the agenda report, the first of which is the resolution seeking the approval of issuing pension obligation bonds. Also required is the cash flow analysis, the cost of issuance, and the preliminary official statement. It's important to note of these documents, the one that is most impressive, I think, in terms of its size is the preliminary official statement. This is an extraordinarily dense document with a lot of information, but the majority of the information presented here is not original in the sense that it is sourced from other documents that already exist in the public domain, specifically our annual financial report and CalPERS valuation reports. Part of the strategy and the approval that we're seeking today is an understanding also that the decision we make today regarding the ultimate size and timing of the bonds might not be the most informed decision. We are in a very dynamic environment right now, and we need to watch this very, very closely. So what we are suggesting is that we're asking for the approval of issuance of the full $200 million bond amount, as well as the ability to decide on the appropriate timing of issuance, and this will be communicated with the city council. Specifically, the wording of the recommendation is that we ask that the city council adopts the next resolution in order to approve the preliminary official statement prepared for the issuance of pension obligation bonds, approve the issuance of pension obligation bonds, and approve associated documents. And with that, that concludes my prepared comments, and we would be happy to answer any questions or enter into a discussion.
Thanks very much, Clay. Very comprehensive report. Council members, questions?
Well, I think with the announcement about the COVID vaccine coming up, I think that's going to help the economy a lot, and it should increase the return on investment in the first year because of the fact that that should make people more optimistic in what they're going to do in life as far as helping the economy to proceed in the right direction.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to make a comment?
I've got a question for Clay. The risk section of the staff report says, most significant is the risk that significant investment losses occur after depositing bond proceeds with CalPERS. Can you talk more about that?
Well, that really is the big issue, isn't it? We are effectively, I mean, this transaction at its most basic level is we're borrowing money at a low interest rate to give to CalPERS to plug the funding hole in our pension plans. That hopefully they don't turn around and lose that. Sadly, we do not have a whole lot of opportunity to affect the investment decisions made by CalPERS, and even they don't have the ability to affect the impact of the markets. That is the risk. That is the big problem.
So is the risk that we, for instance, borrow at 3% and all of a sudden that money starts earning less than 3%?
I would say that is the worst of the possible scenarios. Realistically, anytime the plan earns less than 7%, we potentially need to pay more money. Issuing POBs helps our situation as long as CalPERS earns more than the bond issuance rate of what we're estimating to be 3.19. But if they return less than 3.19 over a prolonged period of time, that is effectively borrowing money at a high rate to invest it at a low rate.
Okay. But we're going to, if CalPERS delivers a lower rate, that's kind of going to happen whether we use POBs or not. It's just the amount.
That's correct. And that's one of those points that I question myself whether that sound logic or not. But the way I think about it and the way I feel about that is CalPERS performing below their target amount is bad for us, whether it's them losing cash from our general fund, cash from our pension obligation bonds, or on our IOU. Because realistically,
in any case, we're going to owe it.
That's correct.
But the POBs, we could say, might reduce the pressure of the overall fund to deliver at the higher level.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And maybe most importantly, it creates the opportunity to create cash flow savings that, particularly in the first few years where we're most at risk, it gives us the ability to kind of double down on this and reinvest some of the savings back into the plan to even get further ahead, because it really is the first few years that are the most dangerous.
All right, thanks, Clay. Thanks, Steve. Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Angela, did you receive any comments for this item?
We received no comments, sir.
All right. Then if this is the chance to discuss this some more. If not, I'm prepared to take a motion.
Well, I've got one more comment. I think, when we talk about the market risk, there's one, oddly enough, what we're facing is kind of a good situation. Today, in the North Carolina Senate race, a Democrat conceded his race to Republican. If the Senate does, with two more yet to go in Georgia on a runoff, if the Senate, for instance, stays in Republican hands, then essentially you have a mixed legislature, or you have a Democratic House of Representatives, you have a Senate that's Republican, and then the White House is Democrat. The markets, to my understanding, actually like that. because it does give a degree of certainty. There's not going to be any radical tax law change, those kind of things for the next 2 years at least, until there's a potential change in the mix of who controls the legislation. So I actually see the market's going to respond positively to a mixed party rule in this country for the next 2 years. And that's good for us. It lowers the risk of something radical happening. That's my opinion.
I agree with you, Steve. That's assuming that all happens. But I agree with you. Clay, just a question. I think I don't know the answer to this, but when you're talking about loss, you're not talking about losing the principal. Are you talking about losing just the potential to make more?
Once we deposit money with CalPERS, it is basically just assets set aside to pay liabilities. So there is no distinction there between what if that is backed by bond principal or bond interest or earnings or anything else like that. It's just money on deposit with CalPERS. And any loss would represent a reduction in those assets.
Okay.
So, I mean, yes, it would represent a loss of principal as well as anything else potentially.
As the case for that would be if we went negative, if the investments were so poor that we actually lost money in the investments.
That's correct.
Okay. I appreciate that, Clay. Thank you. More questions?
It seems like the doing nothing strategy poses the most risk. And while there's risk with everything, it seems like we're reducing risk by moving forward with this. Maybe this is a question. We're going to authorize the issuance of $200 million maximum in bonds. And then who's going to be the principal person that decides if we issue all of it at once? And what does that strategy look like? Is it going to be a progressive year? Okay, we do 50 million this year and then another 50 million next year, or what does that look like? Am I understanding the process correctly?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on how the city council chooses to approve the transaction. We are seeking the authority to issue up to the full amount based on market conditions. However, if market conditions appear to be unstable and it seems like going all in with the full amount's a bad decision, then we would discuss it and probably issue at a lower, more appropriate dollar amount. Ultimately, if that authority is granted, it would be under the guidance of the city manager. However, watching Mr. Mitchell perform through these discussions is he's seeking counsel through professionals and people that do this every day. So I certainly wouldn't think it's a single individual, but realistically it comes back to what does the city council authorize.
Council member, remember we entered into an agreement with Bank of America, so we're relying on their investment expertise to know when is the right time to pull the trigger. And as we've sort of talked about strategies, we've talked about pros and cons of when to go and how much to go and whether to do one full bond issuance or several tranches over periods of time. And so I think we're asking the right questions of the right people. And so we'll continue that conversation. But this action by the council would give staff the authorization to issue the bonds at that maximum amount. And then we would keep the council informed of those decisions.
Great. Okay. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Hey, this is a question for either Graham or Clay. I know it's probably not at all possible, but was there any possibility of mitigating our risk by not giving the money to CalPERS? That's the only part of this that really scares me is CalPERS makes decisions that are not always based upon sound economic logic. They make decisions based upon the political wins. Sometimes they won't invest in companies that they don't like politically, and they will invest in companies they do like politically, but maybe it's not the best investment. So is there any way we could take this bond, keep the money ourselves, and dole it out to CalPERS as we need to?
That was a question I specifically asked of our bond counsel, and they felt that no is the answer to that, that any amount of bond proceeds generated through this transaction have to be deposited with CalPERS. One of the strategies we felt very strongly about that we wanted to pursue was hedging our bets by putting some of the bond proceeds in the Section 115 trust. So we were divesting a little bit from CalPERS, but still having the money available for that purpose. And we were advised that we could not do that. We, in fact, had to give it to CalPERS. However, what would help mitigate that would be taking some of the potential savings and putting it into the 115, so we do have that as a safety net for the potential of CalPERS losses.
Graham, are you considering doing that?
Well, so as Mr. Shane said, we cannot use any of the bond proceeds except for giving them to PERS. But we do think, as part of the bond or the pension policy that you guys adopted last week, that the savings should go into that 115 trust account. Then it's protected and it can be used for really one thing and one thing only, and that's continuing to reduce our liability.
That would make me feel better.
Yep.
Okay, I think I've got my questions answered. Gary, you have anything?
Yes. I think that these are historic low interest rates, and that happens not too often. So I think this is a good time to essentially refinance our mortgage. And with these low rates, I think that takes away a lot of the risk. I think it's not that difficult to get returns higher than that. So I think this is a prudent decision. Of course, every decision has some risk, but I think it's a calculated risk. And I think it'll probably save the taxpayers a lot of money.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I got a question. So on the analysis of projected savings schedule, you show debt service for the next 20 years at roughly 13.7 million per year. The middle column, debt service, 13.7. And the UAL payment says, well, this is what we would pay if we were to do nothing today and just continue to make payments to PERS for our UAL payment, correct? So far, so good?
That is correct, although it does not take into account the potential for new debt.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
The 17.236 million is if we don't even do POBs at all. We're going to have to take 17 million out of the general fund and pay down our PERS payment. So, but if we refinance, now we're only going to pay, well, we're going to pay 13 million for the debt instead of 17 million to PERS. So our savings in that first year is 3.5 million. I think what Bill's saying, or what I agree with, is, man, anytime you refinance a mortgage and you save money because you refinance a mortgage, why not put that savings into continuing to lower your principal on that mortgage instead of going out and buying a car with it?
Yep, that is a fantastic point. That absolutely is a prudent thing to do, whether it be directly paying down the mortgage by putting it back in and paying down principal, or even setting it aside in another savings account. That certainly would be a prudent thing to do, as opposed to going out and buying a boat.
And in our case, instead of using the money in the general fund for other purposes in the city, as Graham said, we would set this aside in the Section 115 trust, and that kind of obligates it to that pension obligation only, correct?
That is correct. However, it also gives us pretty significant flexibility on when we use that money for that purpose. So should for some reason CalPERS payments climb immediately after we conduct this transaction, we would theoretically be able to access that money to help pay the bill.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
complicated issue. Any more questions? Okay, I think we've, I don't know about you. I feel more comfortable having had that discussion. I know that Graham is contacting and working with the best consultants that money can buy. And it seems like a reasonable thing to do, especially the way we're approaching it. So I'm open to a motion.
I'll make a motion that the city council adopts the next resolution in order to approve the preliminary official statement prepared for the issuance of POBs and approve the issuance of the POB, the bonds, and approve associated documents.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded.
Thank you, sir.
Angela, I never asked if there were, oh, you told me there were no comments for this item, right?
There were no comments, sir.
All right,
Thank you.
so ready to vote.
Thank you. Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Councilmember Goebel,
Yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote.
All right, great work, everybody. I know you put a lot of time and effort into this. Thank you for making it so understandable. The next administrative report, item 12, is a project update on the Main Street, Green Street project. Staff, you tell us about this, please?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we have actually kind of two agenda items back to back, and we split these up because they are two separate projects, but they're trying to accomplish the same thing, get some feedback from the council on where we're at with these projects. I'll just introduce the two presenters in the order that you'll be hearing from them and give a little context. So I'll talk about the context first. Both of these projects are capital projects that are being proposed to occur in the downtown or the transit district specific plan area. And frankly, it's an area that hasn't seen a lot of investment, both public investment or private investment in many years. And so this is seen by staff as a catalyst project with the aim of infusing some public capital into it with the goal of attracting some private capital for some reinvestment and redevelopment in the area. And you'll hear where the funding sources come from. You'll see that none of it's coming from general fund. The first presentation you're going to hear is from Tony Mendoza. He's one of our associate engineers. Just for context, Mr. Mendoza was the project manager for the Magnolia rehabilitation. So all the great work that's happened at the Magnolia was Mr. Mendoza's work. And then after Mr. Mendoza and you provide feedback, we'll have a presentation from Sinan Kachi. Mr. Kachi is an assistant engineer with the city. And just so you know, for context, he's the engineer running the projects that are occurring, all the different projects that are occurring at Wells Park. So he's staying busy with that too. So we're really pleased with both these individuals. And from there, I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Mendoza.
Thank you, Graham. Let's see, I'll get my screen set up. Again, thank you for that. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and City Council. My name is Tony Mendoza. I'm a project manager for the City of El Cajon Public Works Department. So we have a few slides that we'll be sharing on a project that we're working on, the Main Street, Green Street Improvement Project. And we're really excited about this. This is a hard project where we've been working really hard on it, so it's a long time coming. And we're eager to present this project update. Okay, so kind of just what we're going to be talking about, just a little bit of the project background, a little bit of the scope of the project, and then we'll be talking about the funding and the scheduling. In the background of this slide, we have the project corridor, which is on Main Street, West Main Street from Marshall to Johnson Avenue. And so when we look at this, we kind of see a lot of potential there. And so that's kind of how I see this. It's a blank canvas, and so a lot of room for the improvements that we want to do. And really the improvements that will be most noticeable and most change will be along this corridor. So let's just talk a little bit about the background. A lot of these projects, or these two projects, I'm sorry, are coming from the TDSP, the Transit District Specific Plan, which was approved by the City Council in May 2018. And so what some of the, what the TDSP was targeting to do was to improve some of the elements of the multimodal transportation for bicyclists, pedestrians, public transportation, and vehicles as well. But then also revitalize the area, which led to the rezoning of this area. And so two of the things that that were included with this was recommendations for some projects that led to the two projects that we're presenting today. And so one is the El Cajon Boulevard Streetscape Improvement Project, which my colleague Cajon, which he'll be speaking on, and then the Main Street Green Street Improvement Project, which is the project that we're talking about right now. So some of the elements that we're proposing with this project, we're proposing roadway improvements, streetscape improvements, and landscaping improvements. For the roadway improvements, we have a bold proposal of proposing to reduce an eastbound lane. And so what we get from this lane reduction is it's functions as a traffic calming measure, but then we're also increasing safety. The elimination of the eastbound lane is supported by the traffic capacity, and we'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. And then essentially the goal is to make the roadway safer for all modes of transportation, pedestrians, bicyclists, and vehicles. And then we're also proposing streetscape improvements. So some of the things that we'll be doing with that is new concrete surfaces. We'll be improving crosswalks and intersections within the project limits. And we're making them safer and ADA accessible. And then finally, we're also doing some landscaping improvements. We're proposing to do a green theme landscaping concept. So we'll see greener plantings and trees throughout this corridor. And we're targeting 40 new street trees. And so these new street trees will serve to provide shade and aesthetic appeal. So here's a quick glance at our proposed cross-section. I'll just touch on this real quickly and come back to it. We're proposing bike lanes in each direction. We're proposing to maintain 2 westbound travel lanes and a middle two-way left turn lane. But we're only proposing 1 eastbound lane. So what are the traffic impacts? So if we look at the current capacity and the level of service, which is a good way to measure, we're looking at the top table, the top left table, which defines the level of service for our road classification based on the average daily traffic, the vehicle counts that we have for a 4-lane section. And for reference, an A, B, or C is a good category. D might be an acceptable category as well, and it goes all the way down to F. So F would be something we want to try to avoid. So then the bottom graphic includes has the numbers of the average daily vehicle counts from 2019 for this section. So we have a total ADT of 14,380 average vehicle counts for going through this section. And so when we look at where that fits for our road classification, it's less than 22,800, but more than 13,700. So that'll give us a level of service, currently a level of service B. But we also want to look at the proposed condition. So for the proposed condition of 2 lanes in the westbound direction and 1 lane in the eastbound direction, like we're proposing, we still have the same capacity of the 14,380 ADTs, but for the road classification, for a new road classification of 3 lanes, 3 drivable lanes, that's less than the 17,100 for a B and more than 10,275 vehicles. So we still are able to maintain the same level of service B based on the counts and the road classifications. And so reducing a lane would be acceptable. I would also want to point out on the graphic with our ADTs that we have it broken down by direction as well. So from our daily counts, we see that there's an average vehicle count of about 8,164 for the westbound direction and a little bit over 6,200 for the eastbound direction. So it's unbalanced, and we have basically it's showing that we have more vehicles using the westbound direction, and so if we were looking at reducing the lane, it would make sense to do that in the eastbound direction. And then we also, from the same data that's broken down on an hourly basis. So from the same data, we're able to look at the peak hour for the westbound direction, which happens in the morning. And so it kind of shows that it's a pattern more for a commuter traffic pattern. And so, with that happening, you have vehicles. It's similar to vehicles traveling to work or to school, and then coming back in a different, taking a different path on the return trip, because the peak hours for the eastbound direction are more spread out and more dispersed. So again, that would support that if we were to propose to drop a lane, the eastbound direction is the side that would make sense. So going back to our proposed section, I'll go a little bit more into detail of sort of the zones that we have proposed. Starting from the left side, the north side, which would be, the north side. So we're proposing to maintain the existing sidewalk and curb line lined where they're currently at, but then we're proposing a new bike lane, a class 4 bike lane, with added buffer space of about 4 feet with candlesticks with flexible posts. And then we're still proposing 2 westbound travel lanes and a middle turn lane, just shifted more inward. And then we're also proposing, then we're reducing in the eastbound direction 2 lanes to 1 lane. And so by doing that, we're able to widen our sidewalk on the south side. We're able to add additional landscaped areas, a raised bike path, and concrete sidewalks to make room for all the improvements that we want to do, that we need to do for this area. So I'll talk a little bit about the project funding. On the right side, we kind of just have a general construction estimate, which we're estimating currently to be in the $2.8 million range. And so where that funding is coming from is, it's kudos to the city staff and the project team for being aggressive to reach out and apply and receive some grants for this project. We were awarded $2.5 million from SANDAG for the Smart Growth Incentive Program, and then we were awarded $250,000 for the Prop 68 grant from the San Diego Regional Conservancy. So this is $2.75 million that we are getting for this project. And the SANDAG grant really goes to fund features like bike lanes, safety measures, and bulb outs and different features that help promote safer environments. And then the Prop 68 grant goes to helping to improve stormwater for stormwater improvements and street trees, and that's where we're proposing to do some native drought tolerant trees. And then we're complementing the remaining amount of what the project estimate will be with Transnet funds. So the pie chart kind of breaks down the breakdown of these funding sources. And so we're really, like I said, kudos to the project team to be able to leverage our funds to be able to get these grants. Next, I'll just talk about the project schedule. We started the design process earlier this year, around February, and we're currently around the 50% design phase. And so our plan is to get the plans finalized and 100% by early next year, hopefully no later than March, and then to pivot, turn around, and get into construction as quickly as we can after we advertise and award and publicly put the project out to a bid. And so we would be looking at a construction time frame of summertime, and then we have a grant completion deadline of December 22. But really, the goal is to finalize design as quickly as we can, get into construction as quickly as we can, so we can get the work completed as quickly as we can. And so when we're talking about all these improvements, I thought it would be something interesting to kind of show. This is along the project corridor on East Main and Johnson, right where the SDG&E building is. And so when we think about the improvements and what it could possibly look like, we kind of did a little bit of an
Yeah, I think Mr. Mendoza froze. We'll get him unfroze and we'll finish up the presentation.
He was doing so well too, and then just froze.
This is the part I was looking forward to most.
He must have been overwhelmed with emotion.
Sinan, I know you're on the same floor. Are we working this out right now?
Yeah, he's making his way over to a different workstation just to continue that portion.
Okay. So, council, if you can be patient, we'll take a brief, we won't say a recess, but if we can just hang out for a second.
Graham, I think it's your obligation to tell a funny story or a joke or something.
Oh, is that right? This never happened during live council meetings. I wasn't trained for this. I should keep the Live Nation guitar in the office, and then Bill, you could come over and just play us a song.
I'll teach you to play something.
Okay, that's fair.
That's more interesting.
I think Graham should learn how to juggle or tap dance.
Okay, shall we? Is that a motion?
It's not on the agenda.
Hey, I'm just going to have him jump onto my computer real quick to finish up.
Hey, everybody.
Morgan's not going to save you, Graham. There, Mr. Mendoza, welcome back.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was very close to almost wrapping up. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So I'm not sure where we left off. I think it was
you had just showed the SDG&E building, and you were going to start the overlays.
Yeah, and that was basically the last slide. So that was kind of just to incentivize the imagination of what these improvements would look like if we were to show what we're doing and what they would look like. So I just kind of have a closing remark about the importance of these projects. So I just felt that the importance of these projects was that they're the start of some of the noticeable changes to the TDSP area that have been in the works for several years. And so if we're successful, we hope there'll be more opportunities to improve the area so long as funding is available. So that's what I had for my slides. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sinan, and then I think we'll take questions and feedback at the end.
Yeah, agreed, unless council wants to weigh in any issues related to this project specific, because these are two separate agenda items, but it's council's prerogative.
Okay, well, why don't we, rather than get lost in the weeds here, let's deal with this one and then go on to the next.
Okay.
Council, questions, concerns?
I have a quick question. So it looks like a lot of this is funded by SANDAG funding. With regard to the bike lanes, is there requirements tied to the funding that we exhibit some kind of specification with it for this project in order to qualify for the funding? So is SANDAG saying in order to utilize this funding for improvements, you must have a class 4 bike lane?
There's no requirement for a certain type of bike lane. They certainly want the project to enhance the multimodal ideas. So bike lanes is one of those requirements because of that. But there's flexibility on the spacing and the type. But yeah, that's essentially something that is tied in some form. There is some flexibility on that, but it is tied to the grant funding.
I'm just curious to know if there's a huge need in that corridor for bikes. I know it goes somewhere near my district, and I travel to drop my son off to school in that area, but I haven't set up a camera to determine how many bikes actually travel there. So I wasn't sure if that was a need, or maybe you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's this idea too that maybe one of the reasons why so I think currently we probably don't have a lot of usage, but there's this idea that maybe there's not a lot of usage because they're not there as well. I firmly believe that when we are more proactive and we do have these safety features, they sort of bring the bicyclist community a little bit out, and you'll see more usage. But that's certainly something to consider, though.
So it's if they build it, they will come, right?
Yeah. Not necessarily. And I have a question. You're putting bike lanes right after a freeway on-ramp and off-ramp, and you're squeezing the traffic down. And what is the percentage of bike riders to the percentage of people driving their cars? And I think we're making a big mistake by squeezing that down in that area right off of an off-ramp or on-ramp of the freeway. And I think that's a major problem. And trying to squeeze the space for the traffic. If you leave the 4 lanes in there like they are now and have one bike lane that could be used in either direction, it just give you enough space for that.
Yeah, so a couple things then. So on the usage, the bicyclist usage, one of the things that we do as part of this grant is we're required to do a bicyclist count. Because of COVID, that got delayed. So that was done recently. There was a bicyclist count survey that we did recently. So I don't have those numbers fresh offhand, but we'll get those very soon. And from what we're noticing out there right now, yeah, I mean that's essentially what we're proposing. Is it's a lane reduction, and it is a little bit of a bold strategy. But the idea would be that there's a safe bike path of travel along West Main, and then if you're traveling in the westbound direction, then it would turn down to Marshall Avenue, and there would be we were proposing bike lanes along Marshall Avenue as well to connect to the transit center, the El Cajon Transit Center.
Well, you're squeezing the traffic out right off of a freeway, on ramp and off ramp, and I think that's a poor decision, either on Sandag's part or our part, because people are not getting out of their cars right now. They may in 2050, but I don't think they're going to do it yet. And I think we're jumping ahead of ourselves. I don't know how well the bike lanes have worked in San Diego, squeezing their down, but there's a lot more people down there in high-rise buildings. There are probably some more bike riders there than there are out in El Cajon, other than our homeless population uses the bikes.
Well, Tony, a question I have for you is, have you done a specific study on what the difference in the traffic will be going from 4 lanes to 3? Logically, it seems like it would make traffic worse, but I talked to Graham about this morning, and he indicated to me that that's not the case. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so on the first few slides that I had, we talked a little bit about the level of service and how we're essentially trying to match that level of service, and a couple of features that we use to back that up. We also did a traffic impact study as part of the TDSP, city staff did, and in that, as part of that, the work that was done to put that together, they had proposed putting to reducing it to 1 lane in each direction. So rather than just follow that blindly, we did look at the parameters for this project and our proposed cross section. And so what we're landing on is we're able to maintain that same level of service by reducing it to 3 lanes because of the capacity, because of the vehicles that are the average vehicles traveling in the eastbound direction.
Just to reiterate, it's not going to take you any longer to go down that street after this as it takes today.
Yeah, and so the level of service B is more of a the level of service A would be free flowing. Level of service B is a little bit more steady state. But you're freely traveling at the speed limit. You're not braking. You're not causing any backups at that level.
The other question I have:
You say there'd be no backup when you're squeezing it from 4 to 3, and you still have the same number of cars, so you're going to be stopping them more, causing more emissions by them stopping to let the traffic go through, and they're not being able to use that street as much.
Mr. McClellan, I think what the study says is that, and we found this in other streets too, where we've done a street diet, that a lot of the streets that we have in our city are probably over capacity. They're overbuilt. They are built for more capacity than is currently on them or will be projected on them. So we think this is one of those streets. We don't think we can narrow it down from 4 to 2 and have the same level of service, but we think that we can go from 4 to 3 and still be within the same grade, just because right now that street is pretty wide. There's got a lot of capacity in there right now. So it's probably, in our mind, overbuilt.
Well, that might be true, but people are not getting out of their cars right away, and I think that that would have people avoiding El Cajon as an exit because of the fact that that is the freeway exit and entrance, and they'll just be maybe going to Santee and not using our shopping centers and our car dealerships and everything as much, because you are right in that area.
The last comment I would just make is so the project team looked at that, and that's how we feel that what the data that we have, that's how we feel is the best solution for this. But what I would also say is, the project team is committed to this project and to that area. So what we would also be doing is, even once the project is complete, we'll be taking a look at that area and making sure that whatever it is that we're assuming, if that still holds.
But that's too late then, after it's complete. You're a day late and $1 short.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, I share some of Bob's concern about the bicycle lanes. And have we taken into consideration, we just upzoned that triangle by the Metro Center there. And there'll probably eventually be an awful lot of, 2- and 3-story buildings in there with the great increase in population, which could lead to a lot more traffic. I don't know how many of those people will be riding bikes. I'm just concerned that we put forth a lot of resources for something that there may not be a whole lot of demand for. I share Bob's concern about that. I don't know how many people would be riding their bikes out here in East County on a hot summer day. Probably a lot. We know there's a lot of demand for cars, but have we looked at the possible build out of that triangle and how that will affect traffic patterns?
Yeah, the traffic impact study that I was referencing, that's what that was done for, essentially, is to sort of look at the whole area. But I would want to clarify what I said a little earlier too about monitoring it going forward is one of the examples of that would be on the northbound side where the bike lane is and where the buffers are, where the 4-foot buffer is, where we're proposing flexible delineators. Well, those could be removed. Those could easily be removed and restriped to go back to 2 lanes in each direction. If as an example of something that we can do even after the project, and that's a little bit more of of a cost that would be a little bit more manageable.
Oh, I think that's a really good idea. That makes me feel a lot better.
Well, if you can remove it, why put it in the first place? And that's just government waste coming down the road. You put it in and take it out right away.
Bob, that might be a good test, sometime without having to do something that's very expensive and, cost prohibitive to reverse it, because they could put those things in and the cost would be modest compared to the rest of the road improvements, and you just pull those things out because that's what they're designed to do in case there isn't any demand for the bike lanes. That seems like a pretty good compromise to me.
Well, there might not be much demand for the bike lanes, but there'll be a lot of demand for the car lanes because of the freeway. I mean, that's where your cars are dumping off the freeway, go down to some of them to the car dealerships, Parkway, and some of our businesses down in that area.
Actually, you may end up with a lot of students in that area because of the trolley going to San Diego State, and they tend to have bicycles. So that, we're probably not going to know that until close to when it's built out. And I like the idea it may only cost a few $1,000s to remove those posts in there rather than hundreds of thousands of dollars to redo all the concrete and paving.
Well, do you think the students are going to be able to afford the new buildings that we put up? When the average rent is like $1,400 for a one bedroom?
Yeah, I think so. All three of my boys lived on, a little bit off of campus going to school, and I think that would be very desirable for them to have access to the trolley. So I think there'll be a lot of students, because the land costs are so much less here in El Cajon than it is near San Diego State, which will translate into a smaller building costs and smaller mortgage costs and lower rents. So I think they'll have a lot of San Diego State students that are on the trolley line there go in on a trolley. But what I'm saying is we're not taking a whole lot of risk here by putting in those plastic pipes. I assume they're just plastic. So it's not where we're spending millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that's a
good compromise. Yeah.
Graham, I'd like to invite you to say why you've been a proponent of this project, so that I'm guessing that there are things that we haven't discussed yet.
Certainly. So as you remember, a lot of times staff will present pretty much a project that's fully baked and say, here's a project, go out, council, give us the go ahead to go out to bid. We decided, because there's some new ideas coming out of this project. This is about 50% design. So this is now the time for council to really give us some thoughts and feedback. But I'll tell you why I think a lot of things make sense here. I think that street, that whole area has a lot of capacity. I spend a lot of time in that area. I go running on my lunch breaks, and I spend a lot of time running in that area. And there's just loads of capacity. The streets have the width to accommodate the traffic flows. I've seen that anecdotally. The transit district specific plan, its traffic analysis says that's the case as well. So I'm not worried about the congestion component. The other concern I have is, I've lived in this county since 2003, and I've been to El Cajon many times, especially in that area. And I'll be honest, except for the BMW dealership, there's not much change in that entire area. And this is an opportunity to infuse some dramatic changes. And if you sort of envision what's there right now, and then just imagine just new different streets, I think you're gonna miss the point. I think you have to look at it as a complete different design, a whole new redevelopment, and you need the infrastructure first to accommodate the new redevelopment. So I think that's an important thing to consider. The last two things, one is this money is predicated, or the only reason we were able to be competitive in getting this grant money was because of bike lanes. Now, whether you have a designated separated bike lane, a class 4 bike lane, or a shared bike lane with the street, I don't think that's as important. Mr. Mendoza can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think going with the idea of creating a bike lane that has some flexibility, so if we realize, oh my gosh, traffic is so much worse than we thought it was, we have the ability to go back and or fix the challenge there. So I think there's some interesting risks here. I think we're looking for council direction on how aggressive you want us to be with the bike lane. And if you think it's something the community cannot tolerate, then we should probably pivot a little bit. Or if the council wants to see a couple different options, we can present a few different options and bring something back a little bit later on when we have a little bit more meat on the bones.
I like that idea. Graham, you have any statistics about bicycle accidents and how many people are injured or killed in El Cajon on bikes?
I don't have that, but it's something we can acquire.
But you believe that there's a lot of blight in that area, and so you believe we can mitigate some of that blight by building up the infrastructure?
Well, I mean, there hasn't been a lot of private investment in that area, and one way to achieve private investment is to put in some public funds, and that would be one of the things that we could do. I mean, when we had redevelopment, we would do a redevelopment project there, and that would be the way we would infuse money. We don't have that as a tool, so using Sandag Transnet money is one way to do that.
So, Graham, you're telling us then that the bike lane is what allows us to get that money for the improvements, or is part of the requirement?
Well, it's what, when you apply for a Sandag grant, there's different points. And if you were to present a project with no bike lane, you wouldn't have enough points to achieve, to get it. So the only way to get that achieved grant is the inclusion of multimodal transit. Bike lane is one of those requirements.
Okay, well, you just won me over. Because I drive through that area every single day. And maybe to a lot of your concerns, Bob, I haven't come across a problem there with traffic, either direction. I think it's worth to take the risk on the bike lanes just to get the money to improve the area, because it isn't very appealing to the eye right now. Not a real pleasant feel to drive through there. So some landscaping would be a huge improvement, and I think it would make it a lot more desirable for businesses to go in there. And again, I suspect we're gonna have a lot of people living in the either apartments or condos, the multi-story residential that we approved about a year ago, and that's going to create a demand for probably some small mom and pop shops and more pedestrian traffic, and people feel a lot more comfortable when there's that buffer between the sidewalk and the street if we're going to walk over to the store. It's a much more pleasant experience. So I think this is going in the right direction now that I've heard all the testimony.
Steve or Phil, do you have any comments?
I do. I've got a question about the Sandag grant. Are there any restrictions? For instance, it has to stay this way for so many years in order to keep the funds?
On the duration, I don't believe, I can't recall, but what we did do was in the grant, we had a proposed layout or cross section, and so there's some flexibility with that, but from a dimension point of view. But if we were to make some changes, we would have to go to them to approve those changes.
I guess, can you hear my concern that 3 years down the road, we say, oh my gosh, we need that bike lane back. We need another traffic lane. And Sandag says, well, wait a minute. We're going to want some of this grant money back then.
Yeah.
Mr. Grove, I think if we made these changes and then there's no evidence of traffic mitigation issues, they would probably want that money back. But if we could show and make a strong case that this project has created some circulation problems, which ultimately is Sandag's goal, right, circulation, then I think we would have a strong argument.
My second question is why this particular block? And because we go from 2 lanes, getting right off the freeway, as Bob has commented, down to 1 lane, heading eastbound, and then back up to 2 lanes between Johnson and El Cajon Boulevard. It's kind of like mid-block. Why did you choose that section?
I think the best answer is it's sort of part of the projects that were recommended as a starting point from the TDSP. So that corridor of West Main Street is from all the way from Marshall to El Cajon Boulevard was really the whole corridor, and so we kind of took it in pieces. But certainly, if we're successful with this project, we would be looking for opportunities to keep that going further, and if it's successful, to continue that all the way throughout the rest of that corridor.
Yeah, I think that's important because on this particular block that you've chosen, almost the entire north side is the SDG&E substation. There's not going to be any investment coming from the private sector on the north side of that block. Whereas if you shift down the block between Johnson and El Cajon Boulevard, you've got Liberty Academy, you've got some apartments down there, and certainly people who would enjoy a better looking frontage to their road rather than spending this money on SDG&E's power station frontage. That's kind of a thought going through my head. What are your thoughts to that?
I agree with everything you're saying. The only thing I would add that I probably should have mentioned before too is that that's also part of the funding is to connect these multimodal features to the El Cajon Transit Center, and so our project is doing improvements on West Main, but then we're also doing safety improvements on Marshall in front of the transit center as well. So I guess if we're saying why that place, well, that's the original connector to the transit center, and I know that was a priority. If we're looking at it from a grant perspective, that helps make it look better for that.
That makes sense. I guess I would say the next step really should be finish the street and give the people in front of Liberty Academy and the apartments that are in front the same look. Otherwise, it's just kind of a mid-block change. And so boy, there should be a short time frame on finishing the street if that's where we go with this.
I'll add.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, Councilmember Goebel, that I believe we have additional grant applications to do the rest of the street as well. So those are things that are in the works as well.
Okay, thank you.
Gary?
Yeah, I think that the development of the transit center is going to completely change that area. And by us making these improvements, it also makes the development of the transit center much more desirable for investors. And because we'll have the old California Metals area, I'm sure that's going to be developed soon also because there's such a demand for housing right now, and the parking lot of the transit center, and you're going to have a lot of people there looking for things to do and places to shop where they can just walk down the street to do their shopping, and it all ties together and makes for just a really nice environment, which makes it desirable for people that want to live there. I also wanted to add, Tony, even though you're getting kind of grilled here, I appreciate what you've done. You've done a really good job in explaining it to me. I mean, you've really won me over after all these questions you've been asked. So You had good answers, so thank you.
If I can make a point to Mr. Kendrick's observation, one of the things that we know that the council wants from staff is all new projects that we will hold them to a really high degree, and that whatever is built in El Cajon is of the highest quality. It's difficult to demand that, honestly, from a negotiation perspective, when we haven't done our investment in the infrastructure. But when we've done that, it's easy for us to say, we just pumped $2.5 million into your neighborhood. Yeah, we expect you to give a little bit of extra to this project.
I think you achieved that, for instance, with the Texas Roadhouse design. I think the remodel of the police station property kind of prompted the Texas Roadhouse people to up their game a little bit.
Mr. Gobi, that's exactly right. That enabled us to push that limit.
Phil, did you have anything? We've got after Phil's comment, we should move on. We've got a lot of meeting left, and it's getting on 5 o'clock.
No, I think we beat a dead horse. Thank you, Tony, for keeping up with our questions. Appreciate it. And I just like to underline Steve's point of let's make sure we finish the street so we have some uniformity.
All right. Angela, were there any comments on this?
Yes, sir. We have one comment from Mr. Patrick Guillot, and he also submitted the same comment for the next item, so I will just remind you of that next time. And he wrote, as a nearby homeowner, I want to voice my support for this project. I think it is a valuable component of the transit district specific plan and will further the goal of creating a more beautiful neighborhood and gateway to downtown. More broadly, I want to encourage the city's continued support of the transit district specific plan, especially the high density and mixed use development plan near the transit station and along the Marshall Avenue, El Cajon Boulevard, and Johnson Avenue corridors. That's the end of the comment.
Thank you for the comment. Okay, gentlemen, somebody willing to make a motion on this?
Mr. Mayor, this is not accepting a report. This is giving us some feedback. So let me tell you what I heard, and you can tell me if this is accurate. You want us to come back with some bike accident data. You want us to come back with maybe some bike lane options, and then we can present some of those options to get a little bit more hone the plan a little bit more. Is that fair?
Yeah. Are we delaying the project?
Mr. Mendoza, do we have time in the timeline to make that happen?
We are trying to move things along. Maybe there's a way to maybe do both at the same time.
Yeah, I'm comfortable, Graham, with your decision making on this and coming back and showing us what you've decided on. I don't know if the rest of the council is.
I think I've heard enough to say we've got some options to unplug this if we need to, and I'm fine with what staff decides, that they know that that's a concern of ours.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else?
I trust the staff's judgment on this, and then especially Graham's judgment. He makes a very good point in that how can we ask investors to come in and spend their hard-earned money if we're not willing to put some skin in the game, with our own money? It makes them feel a lot more safe in their investment.
So, Graham, do we need a motion on this, or are we done?
I think we've got the feedback we needed, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much.
All right, let's move on to the next project then. The next administrative report is item 12, is a project update on the Main Street, Green Street. I will ask.
So, Mr. Mayor Wells, Sinan Kachi, again, our assistant engineer, will be giving us this presentation.
Thanks, Sinan. You're up.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Again, Mayor, council members, and city staff, thanks for this opportunity. I'm Sinan Kachi of the El Cajon Engineering Team, Public Works Engineering Team. This is a significant project, and it's right in the heart of our city. And as Tony showed you a few minutes ago, just from all the exciting bike lanes that you guys were discussing. Go ahead. I realize don't have my PowerPoint going for you. All right, there we go. So the project, El Cajon Boulevard Streetscape Improvements, aims to continue successful streetscape improvements installed by the city back in 2008 on Main Street and Magnolia Avenue in the downtown district. Along with the streetscape enhancements, a primary aspect of our project is the installation of a traffic roundabout at the intersection of El Cajon Boulevard and Johnson Avenue. It's the first of 3 traffic roundabouts proposed for the El Cajon Boulevard corridor and will replace an existing traffic signal. Before we get into the project details, I'd like to discuss the area we'll be working in and how we got to this point. So we're looking to improve the main entrance to our city. That's El Cajon Boulevard coming off the I-8 off-ramp there. While the roundabout is planned for El Cajon Boulevard and Johnson, we have vast streetscape improvements coming on El Cajon Boulevard from Lemon Avenue all the way up to Lexington Avenue. For reference, that's nearly the BMW dealership to the Volkswagen, the former Volkswagen property, I should say. We'll also work along Palm Avenue, a frequently used route connecting El Cajon Boulevard to the transit center on Marshall. So during the Main Street project update you just received from Tony Mendoza a few minutes ago, he spoke about the Transit District Specific Plan in depth, or I'll call the TDSP. The same plan is a key driver to this project. So in 2018, the Community Development Department and the City Council worked to rezone this area that you see in the graphic on the left. It's a triangular area bound by Main, Marshall, and El Cajon Boulevard very generally. The star in the center is the intersection of El Cajon Boulevard and Johnson and is the focus of our project. The TDSP made sweeping changes to land use in the transit district, and it's in an effort to revitalize a critical area of our city. We're taking a bold approach to this area, starting with the TDSP, an area that needs help. Many industrial and small-scale commercial properties are now zoned mixed-use retail and residential, and we anticipate some of that development where high-rises and a lot of kind of urban living in this area. So along with the comprehensive zoning update, the TDSP provides guidelines for design, including sustainable street improvements that support walking, biking, and transit use. The plan also calls for those 3 traffic roundabouts on El Cajon Boulevard to improve transportation. Again, a goal of the TDSP is to achieve sustainability with some of these improvements that we're proposing here. Some of the methods include establishing an urban tree canopy. This area is highly under-treed, and also implementing stormwater treatment systems. If you drive that area now, there's an awful lot of concrete and asphalt. So by adopting the TDSP, the city became highly qualified for various grant opportunities. While the council and community development were working to adopt the TDSP, the council also authorized staff to submit applications in order to begin implementation of the TDSP. So we were successful on 2 fronts. We received $2.5 million also through Sandag's Smart Growth Incentive Program for this project, in addition to the $2.5 for Tony Mendoza's Main Street project. And our specific dollars are to construct that roundabout and implement those streetscape improvements. So in a few months later, the city also received $250,000 from the San Diego River Conservancy. That's through Prop 68. And those dollars are meant specifically for new street trees and stormwater treatment systems within the project limits. So in summary, with Tony's project and mine also, or I should say the city's projects, that's $5.5 million awarded to the city being presented to you today. So when looking at Main Street and the El Cajon Boulevard streetscape projects collectively, grant funding will account for roughly 80% of all project expenses, and that's based on our current 50% design. So a little bit more about the project and some of our existing conditions. Here's the signalized intersection of El Cajon Boulevard and Johnson as it stands today. This image was taken just a few months ago in September. Thankful to our GIS team who got me this aerial imagery. Roughly 17,000 vehicles pass through this intersection per day. As you can see, it's tough to see there, but numbers in red represent the vehicles per day in each direction. Obviously, El Cajon Boulevard is our dominant route here, but we have significant traffic flows on Johnson Avenue as well. And just south of this intersection, closer to the BMW dealership or the intersection of Washington, Marshall, and El Cajon Boulevard, we have nearly 25,000 vehicles per day. So as you can see, there's some skewed angles at this intersection. Just about all the intersections we work on in El Cajon are perpendicular 90-degree intersections, but we're attacking this corridor because there's some interesting layouts that we want to make better. So sight distance is reduced around these corners, and the traffic volumes along with the sight distance have contributed to substantial collisions at this intersection. So it makes those turning movements difficult. And if you look at the longest leg there from corner to corner, pedestrians are faced with lengthy crosswalks and probably some of the longest in the city, roughly 150 feet. So every time those pedestrians activate those crosswalks, vehicles are stopping there and for a long time. Those are some of our longest crossings. So the time allowed for those pedestrians to cross also means it's the longest amount of seconds that we give out of our 112 signalized intersections. So you may have noticed also temporary traffic signal poles if you travel through this intersection, if you've gone recently, at least in the last couple of years. So 2 different traffic signal poles at this intersection have been knocked down 4 times in the last 2 years. That's a high percentage when you compare it to the rest of the city. So this intersection has got city crews performing maintenance very often. And as you can see there in the graphic, 17 injury-related collisions in the last 5 years. So now we can dive into the project. I provided you some background, and I'd like to describe some of the capital improvements that are under design that have reached roughly this 50% milestone. So we'll remove the traffic signal at El Cajon Boulevard and Johnson in favor of a single-lane roundabout, as shown in the 2 graphics here on your screen. With the roundabout comes shorter, high-visibility crosswalks with warning flashers. We'll have areas for public plazas, new lighting, new planting areas within the public right-of-way. We're planning for 2 large specimen trees that will convert the intersection into a celebrated entryway. It'll really be more of a landmark type of area as you enter the city. The roundabout is designed to accommodate emergency vehicles, semi-trucks, buses, and your everyday passenger cars. Probably the most important feature of the roundabout is we can expect an overall reduction in vehicle and pedestrian collisions and an even greater decrease in serious injury collisions. The traditional conflict points of a signalized intersection, in other words, head-on collisions, left turns, and right turn angle crash types will be eliminated. Most traffic congestion is caused by intersections, and reducing the number of stops can really improve the traffic flow. Essentially, roundabouts keep traffic moving. We can also expect speeds and travel times through the corridor to both go down. So we've covered the roundabout itself quite a bit, and I want to talk a little bit more about the streetscape that's planned for this area. And again, those limits span from hardscape from Chamberlain all the way up to Lexington, but we also have some striping transitions that'll nicely shift traffic. So El Cajon Boulevard was constructed prior to Interstate 8 and originally designed to become the major route through the city. So for this reason, the street is 130 feet wide, right at the Harley-Davidson for reference, and that's right near Franklin Avenue, Franklin and El Cajon Boulevard. So for comparison, this is nearly the same width as Fletcher Parkway right in front of Parkway Plaza. So if you've been through that corridor, you know that our street is wide for a reason there. There's some pretty serious traffic flows. And the area that we're working in matches that width, kind of unnecessarily, I should say. The street is over-designed for vehicles that were intended to use the street, but now travel I-8. So our project will eliminate unnecessary hardscape and replace with diagonal parking, parallel parking, widened sidewalks, landscaping, public plazas, and parklets. Widened sidewalks will allow for street trees, new decorative lighting, and stormwater treatment systems. The conversion of the asphalt and concrete to planted areas is a major stormwater benefit for our city. It's going to reduce runoff into our storm channels, into our conveyance channels, and then reduce runoff into the San Diego River, which is a big bonus in the River Conservancy's eyes. That's why they gave us that $250,000 to invest in our community. So these streetscape improvements will begin to establish the El Cajon Boulevard Retail Village. And again, this is very similar to what you see in Main Street in the downtown district, which we've been wildly successful with since 2008. The widened pedestrian realm will create new areas for outdoor cafes and outdoor dining, which is obviously extremely important these days. So here's a little before and after. It's a nice exhibit created by the TDSP. It's conceptual. Here we see the current conditions on El Cajon Boulevard. And if I go forward one, and now a rendering or concept, again, of the streetscape described on the previous slide. So this enhanced public realm is a goal of the TDSP. Improvements are intended to benefit motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists, so all modes of travel. We hope this environment will attract prospective property owners considering the area for new private development. While we have our own successful example of streetscape improvements here in the downtown, there's other proven examples of streetscape and roundabouts throughout the county. A long-standing example is San Diego's 5 roundabouts and streetscapes on La Jolla Boulevard, which they constructed those around the same time we were doing all of our improvements at Prescott Promenade and Main Street and Magnolia Avenue, so roughly 10 or 12 years ago. Many North County cities have completed similar projects, while East County cities are pursuing grant funding to have similar success. So the city was officially awarded all grant funding and at the beginning of the year. Extensive design work is underway, and we hope to complete construction plans and specifications by the spring. Based on the progression of our design work and funding timelines required by SANDAG, our goal is to complete construction by mid to late 2022. And of course, we'll keep in mind the construction also coming just around the corner with the Main Street bike lanes. We want to be mindful of having too large of an impact on the public while we're putting in all these awesome new features. So on that note, our department has also kicked off a significant public outreach plan. It's just in the early stages, in which we'll coordinate all upcoming work with residents and businesses. We've created a project webpage and an email, and we plan for periodic mailers as well as social media updates. This is in addition to meeting with property owners on site, walking them through the improvements planned along their frontage, similar to the big Greenfield Drive project that Tony managed many years ago. Where, we go door to door and work with our residents and businesses to make sure everyone's on the same page and is happy at the end of all of these improvements. So since this is the very first step of implementing the TDSP, our project will set the tone for the transit district, along with the Main Street project Tony was telling you about. We sincerely hope to spur more public and private investment in this area, as it really needs some help. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time. This and the Main Street project are exciting for El Cajon, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. I know you guys talked extensively about Main Street already. But Tony's still around. If we're all ears. I also have Ross Duenas on the line. Also, we can bring him in. He's a part of the engineering consultant team that's helping us with this project. We have landscape architects involved. So as Mr. Mitchell said, we want to bring the highest quality to an important area of our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a great presentation, and it's kind of exciting. Let's get thoughts of the council and go from there. Council members, what do you think?
I just have one quick question. With regard to the traffic circle, the egg-shaped one, my concern is with the landscaping that's going to be there. Is that going to prevent homeless encampments from popping up? To, just to get right at it, my concern is that it's going to be a nice green lawn and homeless are going to jump on it as a place where they can camp out. Is the landscape going to discourage that?
Mr. Ortiz, we actually, when we were working on this initially, we looked at a couple different options there. One even more of a monument there, or maybe some activated spaces, but our concern was that that would actually be more of an attractor. So like we're doing at Wells Park, we think that there's some elements to the landscaping that will discourage encampments, and it's through, the kind of ground cover you use and other features that will help. And Mr. Koch, if you have some more to add, you can give some more specifics. But we did think that through as we were going through this initial design portion.
Great, thank you.
I will just add, there in the graphic that you see, it does look kind of like a turf lawn, but we just have not approached that phase of the design yet, where we will be selecting that type of vegetation that's, frankly, is not too comfortable to lie down on.
Okay. Any other comments from council members? Well, I think it's a great project, and I love that 80% of it's going to be paid for. I think we should approve this and move forward. Graham, my script says that both of these need motions, but
this is similar to the other one. Any feedback would be useful. Mr. Ortiz's reminder of the material is very useful. If there's any other thoughts, we'd appreciate them.
For me, I thought you guys did a great job of this. The last one was a little concerning about the bike lane, but I don't really have any significant concerns about this. I think this is going to be really exciting. It's going to be a really good process to start flipping the blight that we see in that area, and I'm looking forward to that.
Likewise.
I have a question. How many vacant buildings, what percentage do we have that are vacant in El Cajon, including Parkway? You're talking about maybe some things opening up on this area, but when we have vacancies in other areas, I think maybe we're overdeveloping the commercial and not enough residential.
Ms. McCollum, that's a really good point. I don't have that data point for you, but I think that is the whole purpose of the transit district specific plan. I think there's a recognition that we probably are overdeveloped commercially, and so there's a need to infuse some residential components as part of that to give more demand for commercial. I think that's the goal of the downtown specific plan, as well as the transit district specific plan as well. So I think you're exactly right. We need to infuse different uses in there besides just more retail.
And we already have so many apartments. I don't think we need any more apartments. I think we need, unless we have really nice design and things like that, and plenty of amenities. We don't want any El Cheapos like we got in the 50s and 60s, where they just have a slab and a parking lot and a building.
Staff could not agree more.
Yeah, that's really the key, isn't it?
We need professionally designed and with the right amenities and things like that, not just a slab and a building.
Let me ask Angela if she had any speaker cards on this.
Thank you, sir. We have two, and again, the first one from Mr. Patrick Griot is in support of this item, and it's again the same language you had on the first one. And the second item, second comment is from Fadia Gorges, and it reads, how can El Cajon Boulevard Streetscape Improvement Project benefit people and identify the safety for them, question mark. That's the end of the comment.
Well, safety is important, but I think this whole project is going to be more safe than the way it is right now. Okay, councilors, this is your chance to give more feedback to Graham before we send it off to develop. Graham, I think you got it. Are you have any questions, Graham?
No, great input from council. Thank you.
Then let's move on to the next administrative report. Item 13 is a project update on the El Cajon Boulevard streetscape improvements. And staff, please tell us about this.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I think we're on to agenda item 14 right now, the Cal OES vehicle.
We've already beat that one to death.
You know, I can only do so many things at once, right? All right. The next administrative report, item 14, is regarding the Cal OES brush engine. And this is a cool one, and I'll ask staff to tell us all about it.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Honorable Mayor and Council. This is Chief Steve Swaney, and tonight before you I have a report regarding a Cal OES Type 3 brush engine. If you give me a minute, I'll go ahead and pull up a short presentation and along with the come on video with that. Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So tonight I have before you California OES, Office of Emergency Services, through the Governor's Office, to talk to you a little bit about their fire engine program that they have. Really the intent of this program is to develop a partnership between the state and local fire departments, which eventually helps out California, makes them ready to respond at a moment's notice to emergencies and disasters throughout the state. We've seen that this year so far pretty heavily with all the wildfires in Northern California. In recent past, we've seen these other instances with mudslides up in Montecito and some other major disasters. So this is something that really augments their fleet and their ability to respond to those emergencies. A little bit of history behind it. It began in 1951 as part of the Federal Civil Defense Program. The feds offered up a matching grant to both state and local governments to purchase emergency equipment. And really it's based off the philosophy that no one agency can afford to purchase and staff and maintain sufficient apparatus for such large scale incidents. Proof in point is some of the fires again this year, over 18,000 personnel on those incidents trying to deal with them. So in 1953 through 1954, California OES purchased about 100 structural Type 1 fire engines and distributed them throughout the state. They've been able to maintain and increase that fleet, and currently it sits somewhere around 114 engines that are scattered throughout the state. Now I'll explain the difference between what a structural type fire engine is and a brush engine is in a minute. California is currently the only state in the country that still runs this program, and it is the cornerstone of the California's fire rescue and mutual aid system, as you've been able to see year after year, that we've been able to put a lot of resources on these incidents and really respond as a state resource and take care of large scale disasters. So like I said before, the difference between a Type 3 and a Type 1 engine, you can see here on the right, the red engine is actually one of ours, and that is the typical engine that you see going down the street all the time in El Cajon. It's considered to be a structural engine, and that's really what its specialty is. Carries a lot of large diameter hose, breathing apparatus and things to fight structure fires and respond on such incidents like that. On the left there is a Cal OES Type 3 brush engine. That's a specialty piece of equipment. It's four-wheel drive, carries about 500 gallons of water. It's designed to go off-road and carries specific equipment related to putting in very long progressive hose lays to deal with wildland incidents. And it also has a pump that's capable of pumping at higher pressures than a typical engine would have. So the program itself, it started really after the 2003 fire siege. I think we all remember that here in San Diego County with the Cedar Fire. The Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission identified the need to put specialty brush engines throughout the state to augment the Type 1 fleet that they already had. They were already in the business of providing some hazmat resources and also some rescue resources, so it just made sense for them to get into the brush engine business. So with that, they purchased 40 Model 34 Type 3 brush engines, and they have placed them throughout the state. They currently have augmented the fleet here in San Diego County. This, along with us getting this brand new one, there'll be 10 of these engines in San Diego County, along with the 11 Type 1s that they also have here. So it really augments the ability for us to respond and deal with these incidents in San Diego County. These engines are purchased fully equipped, and then they're assigned to local government agencies such as the City of El Cajon on a temporary use agreement. So that equivalent probably to somewhere around the mid $400,000 between the piece of equipment and all the fully equipped hose and everything else that goes along with that. So for the city, what this means is that the state will pay for all maintenance and repairs after we pay for the first $100. So for every oil change, for everything that goes on, the city pays for the first $100, and then the state picks up the tab for the remainder of that. So essentially, the apparatus is on loan to the fire department for use in their jurisdiction, and we just basically staff it. And then when the state needs it on a large-scale disaster, then we can send it up. In the meantime, like I said, we're free to use it within our jurisdiction. We have some high fire hazard severity zones within the city, and we'll be placing it out in those areas. We'll be placing it out at Station 9, so it's readily available to a lot of the canyon areas where we've had a lot of recent issues with some fires over off of Main Street, Fletcher Parkway, and such. So again, this is part of the California Mutual Aid Plan. The state additionally reimburses us for all costs for personnel when it is assigned to a state and federal incident. So that's portal to portal. So from the time that we leave the city to the time that we come back, the state reimburses us for those personnel costs. We will be cross-staffing the engine with the crew that's already at that station, so it will not require us to hire any additional personnel. We'll use our existing personnel, and we will backfill that station with personnel if the rig does go out. So we will continue to be fully staffed within the city and not have a reduction in staffing so we can serve the citizens. In addition, obviously this will augment our existing fire fleet capabilities. We currently do not have a Type 3 or a brush engine in the city's fleet. The last one that we had was in a partnership between the county, and they ended up taking that back a few years ago. So this will give us a lot more capability than we've had in the past. So with that report, staff recommends that the City Council adopts the next resolution in order to authorize the city manager or designee to accept assignment of the vehicle and to execute any documents and agreements necessary for this. So with that, I'm free to take any questions you may have.
Council, any questions for the chief? Chief, I think there's no questions because everybody's just really excited. I'm sure all the firefighters are excited to have this new piece of equipment.
They are. They're extremely excited for it.
Great.
Looks like a win-win proposition.
Yep.
Absolutely. Let me see if there's any. Angela, do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No comments were received, sir.
Okay. So I don't really have anything else to say about this. Does somebody like to make a motion?
Move adoption.
Second.
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
Yes.
Council Member Gobo,
I forgot to mention Councilmember Gold had to leave for a pressing engagement, so we're going to continue on without him.
Thank you. Councilmember Kendrick
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks, Chief. Enjoy your new toy.
Yeah. Use it a lot.
Yeah, well,
And the state will pay for it.
that's good. It actually makes me feel safer to have that around. That's great.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, then. We have two more administrative reports. Item 15 is a COVID-19 status report, which our city manager will give to us. Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I do have the next two reports, and I know that we've covered a lot of items tonight, so I'll be brief. But several meetings ago, the council asked that staff provide a kind of a status report of where we're at, all things COVID. And so I'll just kind of share a couple of data points and then kind of where we're at with our current levels with the state of California. And then I wanted to just highlight an operational thing. I'm trying to take advantage of these to kind of share things that we've done as a city to maintain the level of service despite the pandemic. So again, this table is a lot of things going on in it, but if I can point out, these green lines show the number of reported tests that have occurred or tests that have been taken place, and the yellow little bars are the number of new cases that have emerged. So you can see over the last month, we've been having an average around the 300s to 400s per day of new cases. The last couple of days we've had in the 500s, and that's part of the reason why we've moved into a new tier as defined by the state. And I'll talk about that in a second. This shows the number of people admitted in San Diego County to hospitals relative to or related to COVID-19. Last 2 weeks ago, that red line was a sharper decline because we were actually on a very steep decline. We're still overall having less people admitted to the hospital related to COVID calls, but not at the same rate of reduction as we had in the past. At the last council meeting, council asked for some data about bed capacity in San Diego County. So this chart shows the total number of beds available, and there's about 6,030 beds that are available. Council, can you see my mouse as I move it around? Okay, so this shows the line of total number of beds. And there is this idea to reserve this amount of beds here for COVID patients. So in the event that we were to have a influenza breakout or hepatitis A or some other breakout, this would push up into this purple area that's sort of reserved. It's almost our COVID cushion. So as you can see, we're not even close to the COVID cushion, and we have a lot of capacity moving forward. And you can see how many COVID-related patients there are with the little yellow line at the very bottom. The majority of the patients in hospitals are there for a lot of other reasons that are there day in and day out throughout the year. Any questions about this specifically?
No.
Okay.
The top of the blue line, does that show how many people are actually in beds, or those are the available beds?
So yeah, good question. This blue bar right here shows how many total people are in the hospital right now on this given day. So 4,356 people are totally there, and of those 4,356, 331 of them are there with COVID.
Yeah. So about less than 10%.
Correct. This is data that I've put together. This shows an estimated number of active cases. You'll see in the newspaper or the county the total number of cases since the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know if that's a very useful data point. I think hospitalizations are a really useful data point, but looking at active cases is useful as well. So as you can see, we had this massive spike. We talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago. had this really massive spike 2 weeks after the 4th of July. We've been hovering around the 4,000 level of active cases for months now. But in the last 2 weeks, we're seeing a spike, and we're well over 5,000 now over the last couple of days. And that's one of the reasons why we've moved into this new tier, which I'll talk about in a second.
But by
Kind of
percentage,
shows, what's that, Mr.
Graham,
Collins?
by percentage, the number of cases that are in the hospital are a lot smaller than what the number of people that have COVID.
If there's over 5,000 active cases and there's only 331 people in the hospital with COVID, that's pretty low percentage, right?
Yeah, that's hardly a flea on the back of a dog.
Yeah, and that number used to be bigger, but as I think the skilled nursing facilities have better quality control, younger people are getting it. We know that the younger you are, the less vulnerable you are to the disease, and so probably hospitalization is not something that you need to worry about.
But I've been watching this for a while, and if you're under, I think, 30 years old, there's only been 12 people that have died from COVID total.
Interesting. So this shows the exact same data, but I just pulled out 1 month's worth so you can kind of see how that relates over the last 30 days, sort of that general, that rise that we've experienced.
Grant, do you know how many nursing home patients this represents?
Well, this is San Diego County total. I do not know that number, and I can try to find out that number. I don't know how readily available it is. I do know our number for outbreaks, and I'll share that in a second with you. Okay. This shows actually our data. This is El Cajon specific information. As you can see, our spike is as large as it was during that midsummer spike. So we are experiencing a pretty significant spike of COVID cases in our city. What's causing that? I think there's a couple factors. I'll show you one of those factors, but it could be our residents are testing more, but there's a lot of unknowns that we don't have the access to the data that tells us what's really causing that spike. Again, this shows just the last 30 days, what that spike looks like in the city of El Cajon. So we receive data periodically on outbreaks that are occurring in the city. And so I've included two rows. One is the information I presented at the last meeting, and then the most recent data we received, which was a week ago. We currently have 10 locations total with outbreaks that have occurred, with 91 cases and 1 death. And those are broken down by skilled nursing facilities, congregate care facilities, and community, just general community. So our general community actually has stayed the same. Our congregate care has dropped by 1. We had a school that actually had an outbreak. That school has now fallen off. It's no longer considered an outbreak center. But we do have within our facility 3 locations of skilled nursing facilities. Of those 3, there's 51 cases of COVID-19. So if you were to go back to our chart and take 50, that's a pretty significant amount of cases. And that's just from the locations where there's considered a quote-unquote outbreak. I don't know what the total is right now, and we can look for that number for council. But I think it is probably an important number. We know that originally or initially during the initial parts, we knew it was about half of our total cases. We know that's not the case now. We know that it's a lot less, but it is still significant.
Do you know why this is happening, or is there any plausible theories?
We don't know. In the county, I don't know if the counties dove into the data about that, but I do not know what's causing that.
Okay. Well, thanks for reporting it.
So, lastly, let me just remind the council, the state has a safe reopening plan. There's sort of 4 tiers. Yellow is the best, purple is the worst. We've been at red, one of the only counties in the state, at least in Southern California, to be in the red until just recently. We are now purple. So which means we have, as defined by the state, widespread outbreak. That means that if you have 7 cases per 100,000 or more, after you've adjusted some things, then you're in that purple. We've been in that actually for 2 weeks now, which kicked us into that realm. So we're currently in that. We are, but if you look at our positivity rate of 2.6%, we're far below the widespread, or what the state refers as widespread. So I think we're doing good in that area. We're just not doing good in our total number of cases. So what does that mean, moving into purple? Well, there's the state of California as of today. A lot more counties moved into purple, along with the county of San Diego. It means that you can still have indoor businesses such as hair salons, personal care, barbershops, hotels. Those are still allowed. All other retailers and indoor malls, up until this point, when we were in red, they were at a 50% capacity. They're now required to be at a 25% capacity. So Walmart and the mall and grocery stores should only be operating at a 25% capacity. Businesses like restaurants, gyms, places of worship, movie theaters can only operate outdoors. So as you know, we were able to have church indoors and dine indoors. As we're in the purple realm, those can no longer take place per the state mandate. Schools, I know there's been some questions. There was a question earlier on during the public comment. What does this mean for schools? It means if a school has already opened up, it is not required to transition back to distance learning. But if the school is still in the distance learning phase, it cannot open up into in-person until we move back into red. So our schools, most of our schools in this county, or in the city of El Cajon, our public schools in particular, have opened up to in-person instruction, so they will not change based on the tier change. And then offices are encouraged or required to be operate remotely when possible. So that's kind of the impacts of moving into the purple tier. Just a couple things. It's interesting to note, as of November 4th, the county puts out a weekly document called the Flu Watch. We've only had 18 reported cases of the flu. I think people are, socially distancing and washing their hands, and the influenza has been good so far this season, but I know we're early into the season. So I just want to spend just a minute talking about our recreation programs. I've shared this with the council before. I think our programs have been, our staff has been unique in expressing leadership. I know a lot of rec programs around the state of California sort of went into, I won't say hiding, but they just sort of shut down programming. And our rec department said, no, our community needs us. We started doing a lot of video instructions and video classes, and figuring out ways to partnership with the school district so we can still be involved with the lives of our youth in particular. I've been really impressed with their innovative approaches. Just over Halloween weekend, as you know, trick-or-treating was discouraged, but our rec department, in a collaborative approach with the police department, handed candy out at 9 different locations throughout the city. Just, we handed out 32,000 pieces of candy to cars. We had virtual costume contest winners, and we had car decoration winners, and we had pumpkin carving winners, and we had hundreds of people show up at our city hall complex and watch a movie outdoors, so in their cars. So pretty exciting that while a lot of places were bunkering down, we were getting out and through a safe way engaging with our community. I love the partnership that we have between the recreation department and the police department. This is a great example of community policing and engaging our police positively with our community. It's something that I'm really proud of our staff. I can take no credit for this. This is all driven by the innovation of our staff members, nothing by your city management team at all. This is all amazing staff that we have. So they get all the credit for it. So staff's here to answer any questions that you have, or if there's other information you'd like included. I did hear maybe some data about how many cases are out of nursing homes or skilled nursing facilities. We'll include that at the next one. But other than that, we're here to answer any questions or, again, receive additional things that you'd like us to bring forward next report.
Thank you, Graham.
I got a question. How come they don't relate these cases positive to the age groups?
They actually do. There is I can share that at the next council meeting too. There's if you go to the if you just Google County of San Diego COVID-19, they have an entire website, and there is a table that they have that breaks the positive cases down by age group, and you can see what that looks like. And I think it may even break hospitalization rates down by age group as well. So there is some good data in that. I just didn't want to nerd out too much on data because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because I think the kids and younger people under 30 years old, they should just not count those as COVID cases that are going to harm anybody if they just tell them to stay home and don't interact with other people. But
well, Mr. McClellan,
they aren't even going to go to the hospital. Most of them aren't going to go to the hospital.
No, most of them don't need to. I mean, I'll share this with you. It's a little personal, but my daughter's a freshman in college, and everyone in their dorm tested positive for COVID-19. They all quarantined. Everyone was asymptomatic. No one felt ill at all. So they got through it, and now they're fine. So
yeah.
that generation, for the most part, is pretty resilient.
Yes. It's old duffers like me and Gary that couldn't do so well.
Is it okay if you give the next presentation? We
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, at the last council meeting, there was some discussion during the COVID presentation about the notion of what are we doing to help businesses. There's a couple ideas that were shared, and one of them was to maybe remove some parking on Main Street and open that up to the businesses. Our assistant city manager, Vince DiMaggio, spent some time down there, and he can weigh in if I'm not covering it appropriately. But he did a bit of a survey and identified pretty much every business that needs to be out on the sidewalk is either out on the sidewalk or has chosen not to be out on the sidewalk. So I think they're already utilizing the public right-of-way. So I would recommend that the council not consider shutting down parking in the downtown right now. I don't think there's really a demand for it. We've made that offer to the downtown business partnership, so they know that if that's something that's being demanded by the business community, staff is certainly open to it. But there is an expense to do it safely, and we just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze to do something down there. The other thing that I wanted to bring forward, and I'm seeking council direction on this, and this is a recommendation from staff, is at the beginning of the pandemic, the council took some bold moves to create some relief measures for not only residences but for businesses. The council relaxed unpaid sewer balance, late fees. You waived business license, late fees. You allowed businesses to operate a little more freely in the public right-of-way with a no-fee temporary use permit. You allowed our parks to be utilized by businesses without a fee. I think those are the big things that you did. It's clear that this pandemic is not going to go away by the end of this year. Staff would recommend that the council consider extending these COVID relief measures at least through the first quarter of 2021, and then we would continue to bring that back to council if we see there's a need to continue to recommend that. But looking for council direction on that.
I don't know about the rest of the council, but I would say extend it through 2 quarters because there's no way this is ending before summer.
Yeah, and they won't have the vaccine probably
April.
Blanketed before that.
Yeah, they say that the vaccine will be available to first responders, hospital workers almost right away, and then to the majority of the American public by April.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think whatever we're doing, let's continue doing it, and let's keep our ear to the ground to see if there's any other jurisdictions around us doing something different that's helping out businesses.
Right.
And,
Yeah, let's extend it.
Are you comfortable extending it 2 quarters, or do you want to stick with 1?
Well, I think 2 quarters is fine, and you can always change your mind, right? If things are starting to clear up, we can bring it back and say, hey, let's go back. So
2 quarters.
Okay, that's fine.
I'll make that a motion.
I'll second that.
Sir, before we go to the motion, there is, thank you. I think you already answered the question, but Ms. Belgica Santiago asked, what will relief measures include for the city of El Cajon, ? And for how long?
Graham did a good job of explaining that. But.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, can you please repeat the motion, the second?
Gary, you made the motion, I believe?
No, you made the motion. I seconded.
Okay.
I'll then.
I'll make a motion that we extend the program out through the first 2 quarters of next year.
Second.
Thank you. Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz,
yes.
Councilmember Kendrick,
Yes.
and Councilmember McClellan.
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
All right. Thanks, Graham. Good report. There are no commission reports on today's agenda. Item 17 is my activities report, is as reported. We are at activities reports for council members. Councilmember Kendrick.
As reported.
Councilmember McClellan.
As reported.
Councilmember Deputy Mayor Phil Ortiz.
As reported.
Okay. Moving along here, but my paper's stuck, so hold on a second. We have a joint councilmember report on today's agenda. And this is a report brought to us by myself and Mr. Ortiz. And Mr. Ortiz, would you be willing to explain to the council what we're bringing forth?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So this was brought to my attention by a council member from the city of Torrance. It's a volunteer movement of local governments wanting to create some kind of a resolution to advocate for local control, for more local control against either the state legislature or the governor. It's centered around land use, specifically some of the bills that were circulating through the state legislature. And I know our assistant city manager, Vince DiMaggio, was watching some of those. And it's definitely a threat to our local land use jurisdiction. And I think it's timely that, just the state is overusing their authority, I would say, on a lot of different levels. One of our state legislatures actually went to court against our governor regarding the COVID shutdown orders. We're going back into the purple. So I think right now there's about 24 cities that have adopted a resolution advocating for more local control. And I think it just makes sense. A one-size-fits-all approach to governing doesn't make sense. We have some of the largest cities in the world in California, and then we have some of the smallest towns in the world in rural California. So I would like our staff to come up with a resolution in support of the cause. Our friends in Poway, just north of us, passed a similar resolution last week. I know Santee's looking to do the same thing as well, and really lay the foundation for this relationship with other cities that share the same same, I think, good government mantra. And I know my Mayor Wells shares the same sentiments. I'd like to hear what the other councilmen think.
I think you're right on the spot there, and we need to have less state overdraft or over regulation, and be able to make our own decisions based upon the facts. Like this COVID thing, we probably don't have that many people in El Cajon that had COVID. Maybe didn't need to go to the purple type and just stayed in the red. Probably would have been better.
My biggest concern, some of the sentiments about affordable housing and the direction it's going in one form or another is going to be, if you want an affordable housing project, you can bypass the city, go right to the state, get your affordable housing permit with little or no design standards, height requirements, parking, all the things that we'd like to be in control of. And they'll bypass us so that they can get what they want. It really significant, interestingly enough, for places like Del Mar and Encinitas, who really don't want any development. And so, anyway, I think it's important that we at least go through the process of making our voice heard.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is largely symbolic, but I think it lays the foundation for maybe some action in the future once the coalition's built.
So I'd like to make a motion that we direct staff to prepare a resolution.
Second.
Mayor Wells, your vote, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask if we had any speaker cards on this.
You're right, and we do not.
Okay, so my vote is yes.
Deputy Mayor Ortiz?
My vote is yes.
Councilmember Kendrick? Councilmember Kendrick?
He's muted.
Yes.
Thank you. And Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Motion carries by unanimous vote of those present.
Fantastic. Okay.
Thank you.
Nicely done, Phil. There are no information items on today's agenda. There are no first or second readings and no closed session. And this brings us to the adjournment of the regular joint meeting of the El Cajon City Council Housing Authority, successor agency to the El Cajon Redevelopment Agency, held this 10th day of November 2020. We are adjourned until Tuesday, December 8th, 2020 at 3:00 p.m. Thanks, everybody, for a good meeting, especially staff. Obviously, you guys worked really hard this week, so thanks very much, and pass it on to everybody else who worked on it. See you guys in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.